Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Welcome, small business superhero or aspiring small business superhero. I'm so glad you chose us to be in your ears today and that I and my amazing guest, can join you on a small part of your journey. You never know how someone you encounter, whether it be someone whose story you hear on a podcast, meet at an event, in an old workplace, or see speak somewhere, can positively influence your own path and when. And it always blows me away to hear stories of how people support each other in the small business community and how all that comes about. Me and my guest today have our own little path crossing story. I spent a small stretch of time running the content marketing team at Tourism Tasmania, and I got to see Sofia, today's business builder, share the story of her cycling tours business at a tourism event. And I was absolutely blown away by her passion for what she does and how she does it. I wrote down that day in a little note that was on the back of her promotional postcard that said, "How can we get Sofia into some amazing content?" And here we are, I don't know how long later, creating some magic together, just not exactly what I had in mind at the time. Sofia shares with us today her experience in stepping away from an intense path of study without a plan, navigating the challenge of starting a business that's not embedded in academics when your path and personal plan had always included said academics, the role of friends and family and trusted advisors in getting started in business, understanding how to balance what you want your brand to be called and to represent with staying quote unquote searchable, balancing a dual hustle and finding success in a niche. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here. And if you love these chats and they're giving you value, make sure you let me know. You can drop me a DM, an email, a review. I love them all. Anyway, I really hope you enjoy this chat. I'm here with Sofia Tsamassiros, owner of Eudaimonia, Tasmanian cycling tours. Did you like how I put my inflection there? I really tried very hard to make sure that I didn't sound far too Australian. But this beautiful business is a female-owned and operated, sustainable tourism-focused business, guiding multi-day tours to showcase Tasmania's local people, places and food. Eudaimonia is a Greek word which defines well-being as following your passion, which defines and describes both Sofia as a person and the business she's designed. It's also a word I think the listener and I can get right around because it is exactly what we're all about. Sofia and the team behind Eudaimonia Tasmanian Cycling Tours believe that riding along open roads, whether surrounded by trees, a body of water, a pack of cows, or maybe nothing but your own breath, is the perfect way to find yourself, to appreciate our place on this earth and how much beauty there is around us. Sofia, we can't wait to hear all about how you created this beautiful business of yours. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Well, thanks for having me, Kim.
So glad to have you here and thank you for guiding me through correct pronunciation so I didn't stuff that up.
They did it well.
Thank you. Tell me, before we go into your story of your business, how would your best friend describe you?
I should have pre-thought this because I know that you asked that question. Probably like conscientious, I guess, and passionate.
I like that. Reading some of your backstory, I can see why they might say that. So we will get into that. Before Eudaimonia was a real business, before you were doing Tasmanian cycling tours, who were you?
I was a very different person. I guess I kind of followed a pretty traditional path, sort of finishing school, going straight to uni, and I was studying medicine for sort of 3 years. And halfway through exams 1 year, I kind of basically was like, I've definitely hit an end road here. I was like in a very bad mental health space and something needed to change. I kind of consider myself lucky in some ways that I was able to recognize that before it got sort of much further. Yeah, and then I guess being someone who was or is, I guess, but very sort of motivated to do things, I really struggled sitting in limbo for a while. I quit uni. The way that medicine works is that you have to go back at the beginning of a school year, and you can't have more than 1 year off at a time. So I quit halfway through the year, and I knew that I wasn't ready to go back the following year. So I kind of just left that to the wayside, and I was like, I'm just not even going to try at this point. I just needed to kind of rethink what I was doing. Yeah, and then during that time, I was riding my bike a whole lot, something that kind of just allowed me space, and it really allowed me to explore specifically Tassie, but also, I guess, myself in lots of ways during that time. So I've been a personal trainer since I finished school. So I was sort of working as a personal trainer during that time as well, but had started working at a kind of bike apparel shop during 2017, I think it was. And this is while I was doing a whole lot of bike packing. So just kind of solo riding around Tassie, mostly at this point, which I guess was seen within the community. I guess you see like a young 20-year-old female riding around on her own as like a kind of big and somewhat scary thing to an extent in kind of the world that we live in. But for me, really allowed an opportunity to kind of explore and see the world a bit differently. Yeah, and then when I was working at the bike shop, I had a local approach me and asked if I could organise like a trip for her and some friends to celebrate her 50th birthday. And at that point in time, I was like, that sounds like a great idea. I'd love to do that. And I was kind of just dreaming, and I built myself a business plan while I was at the bike shop because it was pretty quiet and I felt like I needed something to do. Yeah, and I kind of built a business plan without much intention of really doing anything with it. And then at the end of 2018, I did a solo bikepacking trip around New Zealand. And I kind of did not everything wrong, but there are so many things of that trip that I kind of wish that I did differently. I set myself a target of riding really long days each day. The first, I think I was over there for like 7 days and averaged like 170K a day, all solo. And yeah, I was kind of over there, and I realized while I was over there that I was like, I've never been to this place before, and I feel stressed that I kind of need to get from point A to B, and there's so much in between that I'm not experiencing that I should be. And it was like, I remember so clearly day 2 on that trip that I was like, I need to do that business. I need to show people that riding around Tassie is not going as far and as fast as possible. It's the thing that makes Tassie, and lots of places, but I think Tassie in particular, so amazing, is that it's so diverse. I put in my business description that it's about people, place, and thing, because I think the thing that's so unique about Tassie is all of the little towns that we have with the very unique people, which feels so different in kind of each area that you go into. And then also how diverse the sort of trees and everything changes, the landscape changes just so quickly. And yeah, and I felt a need to be able to show people how I think Tassie should be experienced.
It's so interesting. There's something you touch on a little bit there about business planning and, the plan to go ahead. And of course, I had the pleasure of researching a little bit about your story before we were chatting. And you mentioned in some of the information you provided me that you had a plan for your life very early, a plan that I'm assuming brought you to medical school in the first instance. And then, of course, you had that pull away from that plan and that, this might not be actually the thing that I want. I'm interested in how much your personal undoing from your own plan came into your business plan, which is to allow people to go through a bit of an undoing themselves. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think, like I said, I feel so grateful that I had such a big undoing in so many ways. I went through a private school, had lots of support as a kid. I was very lucky and privileged in that environment. And naturally, I think growing up in that environment, I guess the assumption is you do something with it. So like starting a business that has, no formal education, that's kind of plucking something out of my ass basically, is seen as something that's just like you don't do in my world. But it also, like I said, it allowed me to find myself, like what the path I was following was not really me. It was a path that I created when I was 12 that I thought I should follow. And yeah, the fact that I kind of fell apart so badly also enabled me to find the space that I needed to kind of do something that actually meant more to me.
Yeah, and I think plucking something out of my ass in terms of like a description of how I now run my life is just very apt. So
100% the same. All the time.
I'm sure the listener can totally relate to that as well. It's basically just what we're doing with that. How did you find it when you came back and you sat down with this business plan and you're like, all right, I need to take this from a plan to a reality? Those first few steps, how did you approach them? How did it feel to start to take on this new persona as well?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky that I had so much support in my life in different ways. My father's a lawyer and we kind of always grew up, a Greek lawyer for that matter. So, naturally kind of entrepreneurial business was always kind of a discussion to an extent growing up. So I always say I have no reason thinking that I should be able to run a business because I have no formal training. It's all learnt on the spot. But so much of how I've gotten to where the business is now has really just been through different forms of support in different ways. So Dad was a really big one, helping formulate the business plan in the first place. But then I was also really lucky that I had a couple of friends who are a bit older than me, so have much more experience than I ever did. One of them is in media and marketing. So she sat down with me and I always feel so grateful for so much of what she did in those first, particularly 6 months of when I was kind of starting the business and just giving me a bit of direction that I, had no idea what to do. And then another close friend, Michael, who also just super passionate about small businesses and doing things that excite him, and my business did. And just having that support in the background, being like, that sounds awesome, maybe try this, from different people was, I think, just what enabled me to actually continue and kind of jump into the deep end.
That's so brilliant. The role that those almost like casual mentors or casual educators in this space play just cannot be underestimated how significant it is. And I don't know if you found this, but I always find that, for myself with certain things, until I've formulated an idea in my head and I feel confident that I can explain it in 25 words or less, I don't really want to tell anyone about it, or I don't want to tell until it's like a real thing. I don't know if you found the same thing, but it sounds like, from your story and particularly now from my experience as well, there's so much value in just saying, I've got this idea. It's just it's going to be something like this. I don't know. It could be like this. It could be like this. It's not perfect yet. What do you think? And how can you build on it with me? There's so much value in that.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you find in those days, you're kind of starting to make it real now? What was the thing that made you go, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it out there?
That trip to New Zealand, knowing that I didn't want people to make the same mistakes that I did. And I almost felt like I had nothing to lose in some ways. I was lucky that I had family support and I was able to start the business without too much kind of equity going into it. So I was still able to work, and I still do work as a trainer. So it kind of enabled me to follow a passion without, feeling like I'm leaving everything behind, I guess.
Absolutely. How did you find your first client?
Well, I was lucky. It was the group of ladies celebrating their 50th birthday.
Ah, those wonderful ladies.
And I've been so lucky.
Oh, I've been celebrating your 50th with a cycling tour. Good on you.
She was so much the catalyst to starting the business as well. This particular lady has since come on 4 tours. I don't even know how many other people she's sent my way as well. It's great. It's a lot of fun.
It's so brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I feel like my temptation would be so much to be like, yeah, let's go to like a holiday where we sit around and eat heaps of food and chill and go swimming and like cycling tour. Yeah. Okay. I have so much respect for that. It's a lot of effort and it sounds amazing.
Don't get me wrong. It's really the same thing. We just ride our bikes in the middle for an excuse to eat more food and drink more wine.
That sounds fantastic. How did that one go? Did you learn a few things through that tour?
Oh, God, yeah. I think I learn things from every tour that I do still. I've been operating now for just over 4 years. And yeah, I learned something from everything, every tour that I do. I think I was lucky with that tour that I knew the group. So it was a little bit more casual, which was obviously nice. The first group I got, which I didn't know, was a lot more nerve-wracking, I'd say.
I think there's something very terrifying about meeting new people for a lot of us in most instances, let alone guiding them, across a state in a physical format. I find the sort of business that you're in, when you're taking other humans out on the road and there's risk and areas like that. I find that really interesting or maybe a little bit scary in terms of thinking about what sorts of insurances, liabilities and risks and planning you have to do in that space. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so I actually spoke to a few other tour companies in and around Tassie before I started talking about insurance and stuff. Truthfully, I just go through an insurance broker and I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Can you make sure I'm covered? Because it's not my forte and I don't intend it to be. It kind of bores me. So if I know that the first time you choose to actually spend your own money to start something up is scary. But that was really the main thing that I had to throw money into initially. So that was, within my business plan, that was the main, if I'm going ahead, this is how much I need to spend on insurance. And then, websites and other things. But the insurance was the main one. Yeah. So I think just trusting, people that know what they're doing was a big thing. I think also dealing with people, like I often kind of say that I also work as a personal trainer because I think that while it is so different, it is also the way in which you deal with humans is so similar. With the training that I do, I, meet the client with where they're at to help them with whatever they need. And in many ways, I'm really doing the same in guiding people. I'm firstly meeting them with what they want to experience within Tasmania, because their experience is not necessarily what I would want my experience to be. They might want something that's a bit more luxury, or they might want a certain part of Tassie, whatever that might be. But I need to have the ability to kind of step away from what, while still keeping my kind of opinions, but step away from what I might necessarily want and say, cool, I can see that that's what you want and I can meet you there. And then also when they're on the road, I can do the same. I'm like, so most of my tours, they're riding a whole lot slower than I would generally ride, but I'm meeting them to allow their experience or enhance their experience. And that's kind of the beauty and I guess what I can provide them.
Have you had any hairy experiences out on a tour?
We were once up in the Highlands. So we're coming up from Deloraine up to Maina, going up Golden Valley, which I don't know, whether you or many of the listeners know, but it's probably my favourite road. Yeah, so the top of Golden Valley sits at 1,240 metres above sea level. So kind of just like being on the top of Mount Wellington, it can be lovely and it can also be treacherous. And I was with a group of, there was 9 ladies. The oldest one was 74. She was amazing. Like the whole tour, I was like, how are you? I don't even know how you're doing this. And we got to the top. And so from the top of Golden Valley, there's still another 20K to the pub, which was our theoretical endpoint for that day, which was our last day on tour. And we got to the top. It was horrendous up the top. Like it was blowing a gale. It was raining. Everyone got in the bus to sort of get warm. And once everyone was at the top, I said to them, look, if you think this is shit, it is going to be about 20 times worse the further on we go. And I was like, it's totally up to you guys, but what do you want to do? And there were 4 ladies who, out of the 9, who were like, yep, we're doing it. We're going to go to the end. And 20K, I think that 20K took us sort of like an hour and a half or so, which is a long time to be out in those elements. And, I was checking in with them the whole time, but I was having a horrible time. And I'm like, I don't know how you guys are surviving, but like, I am hating this. But, from, I guess, discomfort, from challenges, that's where we have our biggest and most profound experiences. And at the end of that ride, just the elation from those ladies was so cool. I think that's honestly probably been one of the worst days. I've been really lucky that we haven't had any car incidences or anything.
Of course. I think you just touched there maybe a little bit on your own experience from New Zealand and forgetting about getting to the end point and getting it done and realizing, undertake these tours for the journey and the experience you have along the way. I feel like business journeys aren't dissimilar in that, we often start these businesses to be killing it and supporting ourselves financially, comfortably, and allowing others to grow and winning awards and, all of these wonderful, lofty goals that we set for ourselves. But I mean, really, the real benefit of business is in the journey, in those times where you're like, shit, I don't know what to do with insurance. Let me just hit someone up, help me. Oh, look, I got through that. That was really challenging. Oh, I didn't have any clients booked, this time last month, and now I'm absolutely flourishing. Wow. All the stuff that happens in the middle is actually what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely.
So do you tell me, how do you go about finding clients? How do you go about marketing yourself?
In some ways, I think I'm probably terrible at that. I rely a lot on word of mouth. I've got it written down, I should know. But I think about 40% of my clients come from word of mouth now. The other probably 30% come from social media and then just SEO, sort of Google searches. I was really lucky that, speaking to my friend when I first started, I was really adamant that I didn't want my business name to be something really boring like Tasmanian Cycling Tours. But all of my social handles, website is all Tasmanian Cycling Tours, because it also has to be searchable. It also has to be reachable. But Eudaimonia is the thing that defines kind of me in the business more so than that.
There are so many ways around the rules, aren't there, when it comes to, what you think you have to do and then what your heart tells you want to do. There's always a workaround with that. So I really love that you've backed yourself on that name, because it is beautiful and it makes you stand out, and it's what people remember, particularly when you land on your website and you see that that's the story of your business. And it's easy to forget sometimes that people at the end of the day, they buy people and they buy story and they remember story, and by having that up there and by backing that in as your story, it's memorable. It's beautiful. How do you manage your days in growing the business? As you have mentioned, you work as a personal trainer and you're developing this business. How on earth do you manage keeping everything on track?
I would say that I have still not got that quite down pat as of yet. So I started the business in 2019, which means the first summer that I had was the summer of 2019-20, which is kind of, everyone knows as the COVID year. So I think that has really influenced the way in which I've developed so far. I actually think that was one of the best things for me as a business, COVID. It actually enabled me to already reassess what I actually wanted to achieve from the business, which was kind of stimulating a smaller economy in regional areas. I think kind of influenced the way in which I've now spent time within the business as well. During COVID, I was sort of working still full-time as a personal trainer. Last year, I dropped down to 4 days a week, and then this year down to 3 days a week as a personal trainer, which means now I generally spend 2 days a week on the business and sometimes weekends, but I try, and anyone with a small business, you try and set some form of boundary for yourself. You really have to also keep it sustainable. So finding that balance is always really hard. And then outside of that, I also have to take time off, obviously, to actually be on tour. So sort of a general week, I usually consider being 2 days a week on Eudaimonia and 3 days a week as a trainer. And then once a month or so, sometimes it's a bit more frequently, but I'll be away for a tour for a week or two.
Yeah, it's not easy trying to split your focus in certain areas. And that to-do list is just like never ending. I actually just had to move to a digital notebook because I got so sick of rewriting my to-do list and adding to it and making it messy and not being able to clearly identify what I need to do. So yeah, I hear you on that. It's definitely not easy to be able to keep track of everything. Where would you like to see your business grow to? What's your grand vision?
I think that this always fluctuates a little bit. I actually don't want the business to be too big. I have always been quite adamant that I want it to be really personal. I want it to be, whether it's a story of me, but a more like kind of interpersonal story through experiencing Tasmania. So I think I'd said to you, like, one of my big goals for this year was actually to create an environment and a team that I can actually support. Tourism is a really, I've previously had no experience in tourism, and I've discovered it's quite a brutal beast in lots of ways. It's very up and down. It can be really hard to actually make a living on. And I'm lucky that I have other passions outside of the business, so that's not necessarily a big focus for me. But I would love to have the ability to be able to support someone who's kind of equally passionate in showing Tasmania, in doing all of those kind of little jobs that I don't necessarily find that interesting or don't have that much time in doing, but that they love doing. And I think that's kind of what I'd love the business to be. I've always also had this sort of side dream that I'd love for like a bike shop cafe that I did not run, that actually specifically Michael, who I mentioned earlier, would run, because that's not my interest. But I would love for the business to run out of his passion.
Amazing. It sounds like a gorgeous place to bring a community together around a passion like that. The question, you're a listener, which I'm so grateful for. And so you know what's coming next is my final question to you. As you grow and as you keep going, as you keep building the business of your dreams, how can the listener and I support you?
I think just kind of sharing what I do. I've always acknowledged that cycling and what I do is very niche, so it's not for everyone. But, if you know a cyclist and someone who that might interest, then yeah, share it.
And I will make sure, of course, to have your links and everything in the show notes so that the listener can go and get around and experience the magic of Tassie through a different lens. Tasmania is so high on the agenda for so many people, and it's such a unique way to see this state, which blows my mind. You drive like 3 hours, top to bottom, and it's like being in 7 different countries along the way. So there really is so much to see. So I'll make sure to have the links there so that the listener can get around all of your things and follow along, share and encourage you along the journey. Sofia, you've created a beautiful business, and I'm so grateful for you sharing your story with me today about how you got there. Thank you for coming on the pod.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
One quick thing, if you're hearing this, you've listened all the way through. Hopefully that means you really like this podcast, because it's pretty generous to give up 40 odd minutes of your time for it. If that is the case, please leave the show a star rating and a review. It helps me reach so many more people who might also listen all the way through and get some benefit and some support out of it. Not to mention, it puts a real spring in my step to read them. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.